Welcome back, y'all, to the Nourishing Women podcast, your go-to podcast to get your period back and get pregnant. I'm your host, Victoria Myers, period recovery specialist, fertility dietitian, and owner of the virtual coaching practice, Nourishing Minds Nutrition, where we work together to restore your fertility. And man, do I have a treat of a podcast episode for you today. But before we get into that episode, just in case you have not watched our bonus episode that I released yesterday, I have the most exciting announcement I want to share with you first, and that's that we're hosting a free live training this Sunday, January 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern. This training, How to Get Pregnant in 2026, is exactly that. This is your opportunity to kick off the new year exactly how you've envisioned. Like, you know that this is the year you want to get your period back and you want to get pregnant. And if that is you, and I'm speaking to your heart and soul, like, you know you want to be a mom more than anything, this training, it's your first step. In this training, I'm going to help you understand with so much clarity why you haven't gotten your period back yet, despite your best efforts of eating more, exercising less, maybe gaining a few pounds, maybe even going ahead with fertility specialists doing things like letrozole, Clomid, and maybe you're at this point where you've been told IVF is your only option moving forward. I'm here to say it is not, and instead what I want to help you do in this training is understand the real root causes of your period loss so that you know exactly the strategies to fix it so that you can restore your fertility. We're going to talk about things like how to fix a damaged metabolism, depleted nutrients, what that has to do with nervous system dysregulation, and how this all connects to brain-ovary miscommunication and depleted hormones. If you've had period loss for over a decade, you've had period loss ever since you came off the birth control pill, if you have wildly unpredictable, irregular cycles, long follicular phases, short luteal phases, if something is up with your period and you know that this is affecting your fertility, this training is exactly meant for you. You can sign up with the link in the show notes, but make sure you go ahead and do that today. There are limited spots left. See you at the live training. And now we're going to talk about our incredible guest expert and actually our HTMA, our hair tissue mineral analysis, our functional lab expert at the practice, Rachel. Rachel is an absolute guru, and I mean that when I say guru, in all things HTMAs. She is so incredibly gifted in taking her extreme knowledge and expertise in these mineral tests and making it extremely easy to understand. What is that saying from Albert Einstein? Like, someone who clearly knows what they're talking about, who's an expert, can explain it simply. Well, that is Rachel. She is incredible at giving our clients in our premier programs and in our fertility clarity packages to a really simple understanding of the complexity of what I'm not even trained on because it's such a complex test, a hair tissue mineral analysis. That is why I've hired Rachel, because it is such an incredibly advanced test. I want someone at the practice who exclusively does that for us, and that is Rachel. So I asked her to come on the podcast today to explain everything you need to know about hair tissue mineral analysis. If you've been following along on Instagram, if you've been listening to the podcast, if you are on my email list, you've heard me talk time and time again about my absolute adoration for this test. And there's a reason why it is like the foundation to how we now work with our clients. You'll understand that and so much more in this episode. Without further ado, let's jump into this guest episode with our functional lab HTMA expert, Rachel. Hello, Rachel. Welcome to the Nourishing Women podcast. I am so excited you're here today.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. I'm so excited to be here and chat with you a little bit more about hair mineral testing.
I can't wait. And for everyone who's listened to the intro of this podcast, Rachel is our guru, all things HTMA at the practice. She is our functional lab expert. But before we talk about the HTMA, Rachel, do you just want to briefly kind of intro yourself?
Yeah, awesome. So like Victoria mentioned, the functional lab expert at her company. And really what we do with hair mineral testing and why I'm so deeply passionate about it is because it really does give that foundational assessment of how your body is or is not resilient to stress. And we can kind of think of stress in many different buckets, but at the end of the day, when you can really see the data clearly and how it's impacting your nutritional status with hair mineral testing, it really helps to move the needle on certain, lifestyle interventions, ways that you can adjust your diet for the better. And I like it because it really gives you that long-term information that you need no matter where you are in your life. So that is my favorite part and why I'm so passionate about hair mineral testing.
You are so passionate and you also know so much about it. I feel like every time I go through a protocol that you've written, I learn so much. So it is incredible to see you in action with what you are obviously so passionate about. And I love how you just spoke to the HMA. And one thing I think is just important for anyone who's listening to this, watching this, is that everyone, truly everyone can benefit from a hair tissue mineral analysis. So we're going to focus today on, our people, which is period recovery and fertility. However, every woman, I believe, should do an HMA. And I honestly think everyone should do them once a year because it really does kind of, again, that's that long-term health approach and helps you make really thoughtful, intentional
Mhm.
dietary and lifestyle changes that are custom to
100%.
what your body needs. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And that really is, I'm glad you brought that up because it really does act as that almost baseline assessment or just barometer, depending on what life kind of throws at you, which, we cannot predict, but it's ways that you can kind of, support your body moving forward, which is the best part.
Yep. Okay, let's just start with like the basics. What the heck is an HTMA? When people say that, what is an HTMA and why is this test so important?
Yeah, so nice and simply put, I love this test because you can do it at home, which is the best part. And it's a small sample of hair that you collect in the comfort of your own home. And you basically send this hair sample to the lab, and it gives us results and personalized information about how your body is responding or not responding well to stress over the last 3 to 4 months. And like I said in the beginning, stress is very subjective. So I like to always break it down into how, yes, it can be a lot of emotional and psychological states for women. Stress, I always say we don't want to get rid of all your stress. That's not the part, but it's really just about making your body resilient. And also with that resiliency, you can kind of be able to approach different things that come at you in life much more quicker and with a better like adaptation to things with nutrition and lifestyle, and you don't feel like it takes you down so hard. So that's the best part about this test is it gives that nice average assessment, which compared to blood work, which is usually a snapshot in time, we like to see those trends and the averages when it comes to hair mineral testing.
Okay, now let's talk about kind of the main things that when you're going through a protocol with one of our premier clients, what you address. So one of the first things you address with them is the metabolic type. So can you explain a
Yeah.
little bit about how does it even assess metabolic type? And then what is the slow versus the fast? And then like one, two, three, four, like kind of explain like the differences in how a test may come back.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we look at the metabolic type, it's usually at the forefront of the test. So we definitely address it first and foremost. And really, what it does show us is whether your body is consistently living in more of this rest and digest state, which is, a scientific term, parasympathetic state, or the fight or flight, which is that sympathetic state. I always like to say, too, with this test, is there's no ideal state, no ideal test or perfect test results, but we do want to make sure that your body is adapting properly. And there's ways that we can look at that through the totality of the test. So with that, there's 4 different subtypes, right? You have subtype 1, subtype 2, subtype 3, and 4. I like to think of subtypes 1 and 2 as really your body's first alarm stage, which is really nice because when I see a lot of these tests, most women are coming to me when they're in like subtypes 1 usually or 2, which is good because that kind of is that foundational start of like, oh yeah, things are imbalanced, we want to correct properly, but that just leads to, better long-term success overall. When we start to get into subtypes 3 and 4, there's usually what I like to say just more imbalances or desynchronization between different body systems. So it's a lot more of kind of making sure that we're laying the foundation and then also realizing like things didn't get like this overnight. So it is going to take some time to kind of rebalance and remineralize. But it really gives us that difference in like, maybe it's the first alarm stage, or maybe we're more in this like deeper stage of undernutrition or just overall like intense stress that just hasn't been dealt with properly.
Okay, that makes so much sense. But then when it comes to like, let's say you're a slow 3 or 4 or fast
Mhm.
3 or 4, what is like the differences versus slow versus fast, and what does that indicate what's going on in the body?
Yeah, so usually when you're in this slow 3 or 4 subtype, we kind of look at that as like a chronic depletion state, meaning like your body has probably been under a intense amount of stress in different, buckets or categories for a very long period of time. To what extent your body is in those stress states, depends on like the person. And, once we go into their lifestyle and kind of look into those areas. So with that, we kind of look at that as like things have been going on for a very long period of time. And now it's kind of like a what goes up must come down scenario. So when we have the slow 3 and 4, a lot of the times we see nutrients that are pretty low in terms of the nutritional elements area of the test. And then when we have this fast 3 or 4, it's just this over exaggerated state of being in this fight or flight state. So it's like a constant pattern of, seeing these minerals being extremely high because the body is just using them up so rapidly. And there's just this fast approach to the metabolism in which it can't really hang on to these minerals because it just has to get, use them so quickly. So we have, usually what you'll see there is just basically the individual is usually like more anxious. There's just a lot of need for tons of nutrients. And, we kind of see more of this like burnout stage.
Yeah, I feel like we get a lot of slow ones and slow
Hmm.
twos, but I also see a lot of fast fours with our clients, which makes so much sense given that like they're in period loss and they're struggling so much with like
Yeah.
everything from a nutritional status because of the chronic dieting and everything like the over exercising and the high stress levels. So I always
Yeah.
think again it's so helpful to like clearly see the impacts of it all on your body because the
Yeah.
tests don't lie. They very much show what's going on in the body.
Yeah, yeah, and I like it for that. And I speak from personal experiences. I had to clearly say, like you mentioned in the beginning, it is really good to get that baseline assessment, maybe even once a year if you know if it's practical for you. But I think it just gives a really nice visual and really hones in the point of like what got you to this point is probably not going to be the same thing that gets you, feeling better or,
Yeah.
rebalancing, remineralizing, whatever term you want to use. So I personally had that eye-opening experience a couple of years
Same.
ago where I was like, yeah, like clearly what I'm doing is not as advantageous as I might think it is, as much as it might say online or as much as I might read or, look to different people for information. Like you know your body best. So if this is what it's telling you and this is the information that's clearly being laid out, you kind of have to do things a little differently now and be
Yeah,
okay with it.
yeah. But I feel like the data is what allows you to take it so seriously. That's what I love
Yeah.
so much about the data. Okay,
Yeah.
speaking of data, you mentioned nutritional elements, which I know is the next thing you go through
Yeah.
when you go through a protocol with a client. And one of the things I love, Rachel, about your approach to it is you do focus often on those four macro micro minerals, calcium,
Mhm.
magnesium, sodium, and potassium. But you'll also
Yeah.
look at the entire kind of the mineral status across the board, and you're all about like not identifying just one singular problem, but looking at it as like a whole picture. So share a little bit more about that with us and what the nutritional elements portion of the HMA, what that indicates to us. If you've been told all you need to do to get your period back and get pregnant is gain a few pounds or stress less about it or give it just another 6 months, or even worse, you've been told that IVF is your only option to getting pregnant, I'm here to say you deserve better advice than that. And instead, what I want to offer and encourage you to do is sign up for our live training happening this Sunday, January 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern. In this training called How to Get Pregnant in 2026, I'm going to walk you through your custom game plan to getting pregnant in 2026. We're going to help you understand the real root causes of your period loss, the ones that are secretly sabotaging your fertility right now, so that then you can know exactly what you need to do, the next steps you need to take to fix that. We have very limited spots, only 50 seats available for this live training. So if your dream is to see those two pink lines and hold a baby in your arms in 2026, this training is your first step. Join with the link in our show notes. And now let's get back to today's episode.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a good point. Like we mentioned, we already talked about the metabolic type, which I'll look at. And then I also look point blank, like it's the largest part of the test when you first pull it up, is really that holistic overview. So either I'll see minerals that are usually in this very low range, or occasionally they're a little bit higher, which once again is just showing us that your body is currently under this active stress state. So most of the time, the clients that we see, minerals are definitely depleted. And that is something that we look at off the bat, and that can be due to a number of reasons. But most notably, I'll always recommend just making sure that you're eating enough because that is just one thing that will definitely help. It makes sense, right? If you're eating enough calories, eating enough certain nutrients, your mineral levels are likely going to be higher in general. So that's just something to think about as well. And then, yeah, like you mentioned, these nutritional elements or minerals, they don't work in a silo. They don't work separately. It's all a, communication system. So it would really be a disservice if I only looked at things in an individual component versus looking how they interact with each other, which is why I do focus so heavily on those four macro minerals, because I look at it as like you're getting the most bang for your buck. These are like almost the main control center of everything else. So when we can kind of rebalance and remineralize the calcium, the magnesium, the sodium, and potassium, we tend to see a lot of success with rebalancing the other minerals as well.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. One thing I think is really interesting about these tests is sometimes clients will be like, when I see a test when it's low, they tend to understand that that means their mineral status obviously is low. But when it's extremely high, they are often like, does that mean that I'm over mineralized? And you do
Yeah.
such a great job of explaining, like, no, that means your body is actually releasing it too much. Tell us a little bit more about that and how a high does not always mean there's actually a high amount in your body.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely do our due diligence, and I love your approach as well because we do have the blood labs, which is always nice to just compare to just make sure, we're getting that complete assessment. But most of the time when I see high values, which isn't all the time, but a few outliers will show up, is that it's just showing that there's like this loss of energy through tissue, which is your hair, right? You have your hair tissue. Hair tissue mineral analysis tests. And really, what it's showing us is your body is compensating in a way where it's just almost like churning out this particular mineral. Let's just say magnesium, for example. That was like a personal one for me. My body is always using tons of magnesium, which is a response from the nervous system, right? We want to be able to use magnesium, but we don't want to like completely deplete it. So when we see these high values, once again, it goes back to what goes up must come down. So likely if you have a high value of magnesium currently, there is a chance that if it's not corrected and it's not renourished properly, that you can have a low eventually, right? What goes up must come down type scenario. So for me in particular, I really had to focus on, asking why is my magnesium so high? Why is my body using it so rapidly? And why is it being lost? Like, why can't my body hold on to it in particular? So that was really important data. And then I was able to look at it and compare it to blood work, which we do with the tests. So that's just an example.
Cool. Okay. What about toxic elements? What can you see in a hair tissue mineral analysis of the toxic metals someone may have in abundance in their bodies that they need to then detox?
Yeah, yeah. So I always like to say with this part in particular, we're never looking to create crazy detox protocols. If anything, I'm
No, you
just,
guys never
yeah.
do that. It's always just like here is a handful of things you can do to
Yeah.
properly support this.
Yeah, and I never want to overwhelm or scare anyone. So really, I like to think of it, well, point blank, we're always exposed to toxins. Like that's just a matter of fact. So it's
True.
really just about, like you said, you get the data. You're now aware of which ones are more prevalent in the body, essentially, and what are those sources. So it's just a matter of like looking at it as low-hanging fruit. Like if you have the capability, if you have, the financial means to kind of find non-toxic ingredients or just look at things like that, by all means, like that's an easy way to kind of decrease the toxic burden. But at the end of the day, when you do support those macro minerals like calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, you can bet that you are helping your body's natural detoxification systems, which are things like your liver. Sweating is an easy, detox ability. Urination, which is just proper hydration, going to the bathroom properly each day. So those are all like natural detoxification processes that we can all, benefit from. But at the end of the day, we're never trying to, eliminate them completely and make it this whole overhaul. It's just about like supporting that natural process.
Okay. Very interesting to know. Okay, last
Yeah.
question as far as the HMA goes, I want to dig into a little bit more is the significant ratios. This is actually my favorite part when you guys do
Yeah.
protocols. When you share like what the client needs to do, this is the part I think is
Yeah.
personally most fascinating. So explain what the significant ratios are and maybe pick like one or two like as examples of like,
Yeah.
for example, like what is the calcium phosphorus ratio and why is that important?
Perfect. Yeah. So the significant ratios, I believe, if I'm looking at it correctly, some I usually glean over. It's about six different ratios. I don't have it pulled
Yep.
up. Yeah,
I've got
perfect.
one pulled
Okay.
up. Yeah, it's
I know, I'm like so
six.
used to seeing it. So there's six different ratios. Usually I touch on at least the main four of those. And really what we look at with significant ratios and why I love this test is because it is that holistic zoomed out overview of your body systems. The body systems do not work separately, so we really do have to look at it in totality of what the ratios are telling us. So, for example, you have your nervous system ratio, which, like you mentioned, is that calcium to phosphorus ratio. And then we can go, to the right from there. And you're kind of looking at, after that, you're looking at your energy, your cellular vitality, how your body is actually properly using nutrients, taking it into the body and using it for energy. And then we can also look at your thyroid ratio. And then we also look at your adrenals. My favorite one, and one that most women get the most information from, is looking at the adrenal ratio. And that is your body's main stress response ratio, how your body is using cortisol, all that good stuff. So when that is significantly low, which is that sodium to magnesium there, what we're really looking at is that the body has once again just been compensating for a very long time without the necessary raw materials, which is just your nutrients, right? Your calories, your certain micronutrients. And a good example of this, and why I like it for specific periods of time, is I'll usually have women come to me after, I don't know, like 4 to 6 months of a really like stressful event in their life or something like that. I had a client once come to me after, someone passing in her family, and that is like a serious, stressful life event. And we could clearly see how her nutrition lifestyle just wasn't supporting that response. So then we retested, which is my favorite part about these tests. And you could clearly see how the body, based on her recommendations and her plan, that she was able to basically support that body system and that process with her, nutrition, mineral mocktails, all that good stuff. So that's just one ratio in particular I love to look at. And then we also can look at blood sugar ratio, which is the next one. And that will also really help us understand, are you eating enough calories? Is there a nice balance of macronutrients like proteins, carbs, and fats in the diet? And, how is your body responding as well there?
So fascinating. Okay, overall, if you're speaking to a woman who, let's say, has dieted her whole life, exercises so much, has lost her period, but wants to get her period back, wants to
Yeah.
properly support her health, and ultimately wants to fall pregnant, why is this test such a foundational move for her to make as far as really supporting her body from the inside out?
Yeah, I guess big one sentence overview is that this test meets you exactly where you're at. So it is going to give you that foundational level support based on what has maybe, occurred in the last 3 to 4 months, but it really does give that overview of, all the things prior to that. And it meets you exactly where you're at with your personalized data, and it gives you specific recommendations that you can take forward in order to recover your period, just have better over long-term hormonal health, less symptoms related to, any period symptoms. So that is just something that I think is, you can't really replace having that information, and to guess would, definitely take a lot more time. So I think, having that under your belt is huge.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is save you time and money, know what your individualized unique needs are based off of what your body is telling you, and
Yeah.
have really an empowering way to look at, oh, like there is easy, simple things. That's another reason why I love this test is they're such simple, but again, intentional to this your body specific
Yeah.
needs of recommendations of easy ways you can really make a huge difference in your health. I mean, I will never forget taking my own HMA, and I just made a
Yeah.
few tweaks, and I mean, it completely
Yeah.
changed my energy levels. I still can't get over it to this day.
I know. Yeah, I like that part. You keep mentioning it about the intentionality. And I think what's really nice too, like going into the new year, by the time we're recording this, is, there's so much to be said about like slowing down. That was really the main thing I gained from this test, is like realizing, wow, I really do need to assess all those areas that the stress bucket is kind of being overfilled with, and just kind of take it out layer by layer. And then, like you said, just be as intentional as I could. And part of that was getting support, seeing the information, and then, having a system in place to slowly implement. It wasn't about rushing through it. It was about, being intentional, like you said.
Yeah, and you do such a great job of articulating that when you give the protocols. Okay, Rachel, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for your time coming on
Yay!
the podcast, explaining the basics of the HMA with us to it today.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. My pleasure.
Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Thank you, my incredible community, for listening to today's episode. Remember, if you sign up for one of our 2 main offers, either our Fertility Clarity Package or our Premier Program, Premier Period Recovery for Fertility, you will get an opportunity to work with Rachel through the HTMA. She is the one who provides our custom handcrafted protocols. And if you do that, if you work with us in one of those two main ways, I cannot wait for you to get your hands on your own HTMA to understand exactly what your body needs, take care of that foundational aspect of your health, and really set yourself up for success for your period, for your health, and optimize fertility in 2026. Speaking of fertility, if your goal is to get pregnant in 2026, if your goal is to hold a baby in your arms, you are ready to become a mom, and you are ready to take steps to get your period back to make that your reality, I want to remind you to sign up for our live training happening this Sunday, January 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern. There are very limited seats available, so sign up with the link in our show notes. We'll be back in 2 weeks for another episode. Until then, know that a nourished body is a powerful one.